is it because they want to help, or it's because they've convinced themselves that they want to help, because that becomes a reason that allows them to cross the boundary. It's not about them wanting to being involved, which is about them being in victim approach and actually wanting somebody else to meet their needs for them.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
how to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, sign up for more support with meeting your needs with your weekly Universal Needs notes at theuniversalneeds.com.
And enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
So we are on our third and final part of going into the different parts of the drama triangle. We have still another episode on the drama triangle before we can get into the empowerment dynamic. But I think it's really important for us to, this is an episode that is very close to my heart, and not necessarily in the best possible ways, because I've spent a lot of my life in this position in the drama triangle. And I even decided to wear a red top so that it would be reflective of the red triangle that is the drama triangle dynamic. So let's get straight into it, because I got a feeling there might be quite a lot of riffing that we end up doing about this, because this is something we've both experienced a lot of. So quick reminder, as we've said previously, this is about understanding the ways of meeting our needs that are disempowering and empowering. We use Dr. Stephen Cartman's model, the drama triangle, as the basis for talking about these kind of dynamics. But when we describe these, the positions rather than the ones that he uses, we describe these as approaches, i.e. the victim approach, the persecutor approach, and the rescuer approach. And the reason for this is because we want to make sure that we're not conflating the behaviors and how somebody is approaching that with what is objectively happening in reality. And sometimes with those original, I noticed when I first started learning about the drama triangle, it was very easy to kind of end up mixing up the two, and it confusing things, and sometimes leading to victim blaming or things that were preventing accountability, healing, justice, and when there is objective harm that's happening. So it's really important to say, we'll put the triangle up on the screen right now, that all the positions in this triangle, every single one of them, have chronically unmet needs. They are a victim approach at the core. The core feelings that they're likely to be having the majority of the time are anxiety or anxiety related, and the focus is on the problems. And then also on the flip side, the bit that we're going to be getting to real soon, and it's the fun part, because it's the part where everything starts to flow and feel so much better, like in so many ways, is that recognizing that the alternative to the drama triangle is something called the empowerment ecosystem. And one of the things that's fundamentally different about the drama triangle and the empowerment ecosystem is recognizing that each of the positions in the empowerment ecosystem is aware of that they're part of this wider community, and that can benefit them, and they have a responsibility to that as well. And those three positions in the empowerment ecosystem are the creator approach, the support approach, and the contributor approach. And all of these positions, they have consistently well met needs. They are all creator approaches at the core. They the core feeling is want, or what do they want more of, and their focus is on their outcomes. And so, as we've said in every episode so far, in order for us to be able to move from disempowering to empowering, it's really important for us to be able to identify where we are in the disempowering triangle, the drama triangle, and to know where we want to move to, i.e. in the position that feels right for where we want to be in the empowerment dynamic. And this is the reason we focus on the disempowering first, so you can spot these patterns both in yourself and others, but predominantly really so you can identify them in yourself. And then we'll cover the empowering so that you can learn how to move into that from where you are currently.
So another behavior of the victim approach is to step into the rescuer approach, to try to avoid being in the victim approach, because being in the rescuer approach often feels better on the surface than being in the victim approach. However, underneath it all, it is still a victim approach, and being in the rescuer approach is often a way of masking and avoiding the feeling and the impact of being in the victim approach. So what is the rescuer approach? Something that Claire and I have a lot of experience with. Both of us are recovering rescuers. So the rescuer intervenes.
Oh, no, that was me saying, yes, I'm a
Oh.
recovering rescuer, not
Oh.
interrupting you.
Well, then you just stopped. I was like, oh, are we frozen? Okay. And we're back. So what is that rescuer approach? Rescuer intervenes on behalf of the victim. They try to protect the person in the victim approach from the persecutor approach. They believe they have to get involved because they see the person in the victim approach as powerless to affect change. They appear to alleviate the person in the victim approach's fear or negative feelings, but this happens through cultivating a dependency on the rescuer. They try to fix either the person or the situation for the person in the victim approach to try and feel good about themselves. They're often perceived as the hero or the helper, and they can genuinely have the intention to help, but they reinforce the disempowerment of the person in the victim approach by reinforcing the perception of powerlessness. They need, consciously or unconsciously, to look after others to feel good about themselves as a red way attempt to meet their needs, a red way attempt to meet their own unmet needs or to mask them. They often unconsciously need the victim to rescue to bolster their own self-esteem or as a red way to try and meet their own needs or mask them, because inwardly they are a victim approach and feel powerless to affect the change in their own lives. They can be a person or something else being used to rescue the person from their situation to make them feel temporarily better, but fostering dependency. If it is not a person, it is still perceived this way by the person in the victim approach.
Yeah, so the primary characteristic of someone who is in the rescue approach are they try to rescue the victim from the persecutor, they're perceived as a helper, and they use helping the victim to feel good about themselves. It reinforces the victim's disempowerment and it creates dependency. People use so many things to rescue them from their persecutors. Things like smoking, work, drinking, drugs, food, gambling, sweets, social media, exercise, shopping, porn, TV. What happens is this creates a dependency, and therefore the rescuer approach often then becomes the new persecutor approach because the person feels like the victim of their rescuer behaviors. So just to summarize, the rescue approach is at its core a victim approach. It intervenes on behalf of the victim. It's perceived as a helper, and it can have the genuine intention to help. They reinforce the disempowerment of the victim person who's in the victim approach. They believe and reinforce the belief that the victim is powerless to affect change. They create dependency, the core feelings of anxiety. They need to rescue the victim to feel enough. So they're attached to the outcome. They're attached to the victim actually being able to feel better. But also they need the victim to not feel better so that they can continue to rescue them, so they can continue to feel good about themselves. They take responsibility for the victim, which further disempowers the victim, and they rescue to avoid being in the victim approach or to feel better about themselves.
So what are some of the ways that the rescuer approach manifests? As we go through these examples, notice which ones you recognize or that resonate with your past behavior patterns. So the first one is coddling, and this is enabling someone to stay in a wallowing mode as an attempt to feel good about ourselves by taking care of them. This is a red way of meeting our needs. Advising. This one comes up so often. Advising others as a way of avoiding our own unmet needs or as an attempt to feel good about ourselves. Again, this is a red strategy to meet our own needs.
Or try to meet our own needs. I think that's the other thing with this is like recognizing that with all of these are about red ways to try to meet our needs, because the chances are they're probably not going to be effective and they're probably not going to be doing a very good job at meeting them.
Yes, that's a very important correction. Thank you. Appeasing is the next one. So this is placating somebody who's engaged in poor victimhood behavior as an attempt to feel good about ourselves. Again, a red way to meet our needs or to try and meet our needs or to get them to like us to get them to meet our needs. Mm-hmm. Forcing positivity. Forcing positivity on others as an attempt to try and make the person in the victim approach feel better and or to mask their own discomfort with the other person's pain and discomfort. This often bypasses, negates, or invalidates the person in the victim approach's experience, which actually then shifts the rescuer approach to become the persecutor approach.
Yep.
Self-sacrifice. Sacrificing our needs to try and meet someone else's as a way to feel good about ourselves. A red way to try and get a red way of trying to get our needs met.
So the next one is mothering, fathering, parenting, or babying. This is about taking a parental role with another adult, i.e. taking responsibility for their needs to try to feel good about ourselves, which is a red way of trying to meet our own needs. Pitying, so relating and behaving towards someone from a place of pity to try to feel good about ourselves, another red way of trying to meet our needs. Over offering, this happens so frequently, which is like offering more than we have the capacity or resources for to try to rescue the other person to feel good about ourselves. And what happens when we tend to over offer, and also the next one, which is over giving, which we'll get to in a second, is that when we do that, we end up burning ourselves out. And so we end up then becoming the victim of our rescuer behaviors.
And when we over offer, what happens is you end up making the situation worse oftentimes. Like if you're over offering and you don't have that capacity, you're impacting your needs negatively, and it often like backfires on the situation that you're trying to make better by the over offering. We have seen that numerous times.
Yeah. And especially because over offering, there's a difference between over offering and over giving. And so we're going to get to over giving in a second. Over offering normally is like, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. And then what ends up happening is that a lot of the time you don't end up doing any of those things, or you might do one of them and not really particularly well. And the having it offered and then not fulfilled often leaves the person in a worse position than having never offered in the first place. So the next option is overgiving, which is where we're giving more than we have the capacity or resources for in order to try to rescue the other person to feel good about ourselves, which is another red way of trying to meet our needs. Saving, so trying to save the other person, either person in the victim approach from their situation to try to feel good about ourselves. Another red way of trying to meet our needs. Fixing, trying to fix either the person or the situation for the person who's in the victim approach to try to feel good about ourselves. Self-diminishing, so trying to make ourselves small or insignificant to try to make the person in the victim approach feel better about themselves as a way of trying to get them to like us and therefore to meet our needs, or as a way, a red way to try to get our needs met. So this is about like making ourselves feel tiny so that they feel good, but nothing good comes from that dynamic ever. Burden shifting. So this is about trying to take on the situation from the person in the victim approach, or trying to take on other things from their life, emotional, mental, or physical, to try to feel good about ourselves. So it's like, oh, I can see how you're burdened. Let me take all this burden off you. But then we become burdened, and the chances are we're then going to show up in ways that are far more likely to be either victim approach or persecutor approach. And none of that's going to be helpful to the other person. Boundary compromising. This is such a huge one. This is about compromising our or other people's boundaries to try to rescue someone else from their situation, to try to feel good about ourselves, which is a red way of trying to meet our own needs. And a lot of the time what ends up happening here is that we compromise our boundaries, or we compromise those other person's boundaries so that we can try and make things better for somebody else. And in doing so, we make them worse for us, and we make them worse for the other person as well, because nothing good comes from compromising our boundaries. And a lot of the time we react then when our boundaries have been overcome, because that compromises our needs, and it's just a big old disaster.
I actually think this is one of the areas where like the whole boundaries thing really came in for me, because the rescuer approach was my jam. I had the cape, I had the whole 9 yards, like flying into situations.
Mm-hmm.
Sidekick, all the entire deal. And once I started to learn about this kind of positioning, I realized how much I really was compromising my own boundaries and how I was making the situations essentially worse. Like I wasn't helping anybody involved in it. And that is one of the places that I was like, I see how compromising my boundaries, compromising other people's boundaries, like this was the place that it really kind of highlighted for me, because it was pretty quick. I was like, oh, rescuer sounds a lot like me. Like,
yes,
like, check the boxes on all of the things. And then it came to the boundaries and I was like, I have good
Well, and it's funny because like when we think about compromising our boundaries, this sort of makes sense in the rescuer, but it's like I can see people going, well, how can compromising somebody else's boundaries be a rescuer thing? Like if somebody else is saying, actually, this is where my boundary is, but you're like, no, I've got to help. Like, let me come in. And it's like, it reminds me of like the overbearing mother trope. Like with the, one of the things I see a lot on TikTok is these like wedding planner videos where they do these little skits where the mother-in-law is or the mother-in-law is always like, no, I'm going to help, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and let me do this and this and this. And the other person and the bride and groom are like, actually, no, this is the boundary. Like, we are going to do this, and we appreciate that you want to help, but actually it doesn't help us for you to help. And then they show up at the tasting without being invited. That us crossing a boundary because they want to help. Now, a lot of the time, is it because they want to help, or it's because they've convinced themselves that they want to help, because that becomes a reason that allows them to cross a boundary. It's not about them wanting being involved, which is about them being in victim approach and actually wanting somebody else to meet their needs for them. This is where you start to see all the nuance kind of creeping in and all the different layers. And it's like, sometimes we convince ourselves that we're in rescuer, but actually we're in persecutor approach. Sometimes we convince ourselves we're in rescuer and we're actually in victim approach, but actually our victim approach is manipulative, so that puts us in persecutor approach. Like, it's like, this thing is like, it's when I say ding 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 ding, like as in you're bouncing all over the place, trust me, you can be bouncing all over the place. So next option is diverting or distracting. It's trying to distract the person from their issues to try to feel good about ourselves. Again, red way of trying to meet our own needs, as this usually happens when we're uncomfortable. It's compromising, or we're perceiving that it's compromising our needs because we're uncomfortable with where they're at. We're not meeting our own emotional experience and expression need. And so we're going to divert or distract them from it so that we no longer feel uncomfortable. When we feel uncomfortable, because that is a natural consequence of seeing somebody else in pain. And rather than processing that and supporting our own needs, we're just going to have them get them distracted so we don't have to worry about it anymore. Dependency forming. This is such a toxic element of this, which is where you are consciously or unconsciously, so whether you're aware of it or not, whether you intend to or not, you're doing things to create a dependency from the other person in the victim approach to us as a way to feel good about ourselves. Again, it's a red way of trying to meet our needs. And this makes it harder for them to shift out of the victim approach, which means that the rescuer approach becomes the persecutor approach, because it's like, oh, no, you need me to do this. You need me to do this. You need me to do this. And then it makes it hard. It kind of forces them to stay in victim approach because they're like, oh, I must need them to do it. I can't do it. And then because they're being forced to be in victim approach in order for you to get your needs met, that's actually a manipulation, which means that you actually are in persecutor approach. This is one of those, I can imagine people being like, wait, what now? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if it's possible for me to actually leave like a little mini graphic of the drama triangle up throughout this, so that you can see all the different, when I'm like mentioning the different ones, you can actually see it visibly, because it actually makes it a lot easier to understand. So the next option is smothering. So this is providing excessive connection, love, and attention to the person in the victim approach to try to feel good about ourselves. It's another red way of trying to meet our own needs. Pattern interrupting. So pattern interrupting, the interesting thing about this is this actually falls under another rescuer approach behavior, which is further on, which is personal development bypassing, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But what the pattern interrupting is about doing things to not allow the person in the victim approach position to be in their feelings about situations as we're uncomfortable with their discomfort. So so that's as a barrier to healing for the person who's in victim approach, which means that the rescue approach again becomes the persecutor approach, because you are acting in a way that's going to compromise the other person's needs. So this is about saying, okay, I see that you're sad. I see that you're sad. Oh, let's go do this, so that so you don't feel sad anymore. Like, it's like, let me do this. And so what we're interrupting that pattern of sadness rather than allowing them to process it and heal it.
Yeah, that's definitely one that came up quite a bit. And it still does. People do it all the time. Oh, you're in a space. Let's go get a drink. Let's go. Forget all your problems. Forget your worries. Forget your cares. We're going to have a good time. And sometimes that may be what is needed, depending on the situation, depending on the relationship you have with the person who is there to support you, if they are doing it actually in a supporting way. Most of the time it's because somebody doesn't want to sit with you while you're bawling because they can't handle the immense emotion coming from you. And it's really, I remember the first few times this happened to me after like I learned about these kind of things, and I'm like, oh, you're not actually trying to help me. You're just uncomfortable, aren't you? Like, and there's a little bit of like a womp womp. And at the same time, I'm like, no, I need to be in this. Like, I don't want to go get a drink. I don't want to numb this. I don't want to avoid this. I need to be in it. And if I have to be alone to be in it, okay. Like,
right.
That's okay.
And again, there's a difference between pattern interrupting as a rescuer approach, which is like we're focused on the problems, we've got this core feeling of anxiety, we're coming from our own unmet needs, versus saying to somebody, okay, do you need a break from, like, I can see that you've been feeling and processing this from a while now. Would it be helpful for you to have a break to actually get your resources back in order to then be able to go and process this further? That two completely different things. Now, what actually happens may look the same, i.e. the person crying, goes and does something else where they feel good about themselves, and then they go back to crying. That could look the same. And one is pattern interrupting, and the other is consciously, intentionally doing something that will help support them with their healing, which is a empowerment ecosystem approach of doing things. So next one is savioring. So believing we are the only person who can help, and we have to get involved. Otherwise, the situation will get worse, or the person in the victim approach will never get out of it, as a red way of trying to meet our value need or feel better about ourselves. Again, another red way of trying to get our needs met. So common. Like, I have to help. I'm like I'm the only one who can help in this situation. And in doing so, you're not actually helping. Martyring, we also talked about this in the victim approach. So again, that's suffering or self-sacrificing ourselves to quote unquote help the person in the victim approach as a way of feeling good about ourselves. Again, red way of trying to get our own needs met. Control taking. This is about taking decisions and responsibility for the person in the victim approach, for their life, for their well-being, quote unquote, for their own good, to try to feel good about ourselves. Again, red way of trying to get our needs met. But in doing so, reinforcing their victimhood, and in doing so, them for becoming the persecutor approach, because you're keeping them in the victim approach position. And there's a difference between I'm trying to control the situation as a victim approach myself, like I feel out of control and I'm going to try and control this in order to meet my needs, or trying to control other people, which is a persecutor approach. This is about trying to take responsibility, taking control for the other person, not of the other person, but the net result is the same, that you still keep them in the victim approach position. So the next one is self-centered support. So providing the support that we would like or need in the situation, not what the person in the victim approach actually needs or would be helpful for them. And again, we're trying to feel good about ourselves by going, this is what would help me. This doesn't help me. This is what, like, it would be like someone coming up to me and being like, hey, Claire, like when I feel really, really crappy, it really helps me to sit and eat a really big tub of almond-based ice cream. I'm allergic to almonds. That might help you out, but that's doing nothing for me. In fact, it's going to cause me problems. And again, that's an extreme example, but this is, again, it's like I'm trying to do what would be good for me, not what's actually good for the other person. It's not what's supportive to the other person in this situation.
And to ensure that doesn't happen, all you have to do is check in. Would this feel supportive to you? Like, it's such a simple thing that at the beginning of this journey, I never would have thought to even ask. I'd have been like, well, it works for me. We've got to work for everybody else. Like, and just saying, you know, would this be supportive? Like, and that needs to be framed at the right time, making, you know, like, there's nuance, of course, to all of this. And there's little things we can do to, if you find yourself in a situation and you're like, wait a minute, am I doing that self-centered support thing? Let me check in with them right at this moment to make sure that I'm actually trying to help them, not trying to center myself in what I would want and need.
Yeah. So next one is force feeding. So trying to force help, in inverted commas, on the person in the victim approach, whether they want it or not, and whether it's actually helpful or not, because we want to feel good about ourselves, i.e. red ways of trying to meet our own needs. Well intending. Cool. This is a very, very common one. Doing things with quote unquote good intention because we want to feel good about ourselves, i.e. red ways of trying to meet our own needs, with a complete lack of focus on the impact or benefit to the person in the victim approach. So it's like being like, oh yeah, I'm doing this for good intentions. Doesn't matter if I've taken you out of the needs or whether it's not actually being helpful for you. I mean, I've been in this position where somebody is like trying to help me and I'm like, okay. this is not helping me in any way, shape, or form, and it's a waste of my time and energy right now. But I would rather just and okay my way through this than deal with the backlash from you of me rejecting your quote unquote help because it's not actually helpful for me. Like that's, and this is where, like, again, I'm like,
That's when you start seeing the pinging too around the around this, like, this disempowerment triangle is all of a sudden, like, if Claire was to be like, this isn't helpful, that person's going to drop into victim. They're going to throw Claire over into that persecutor, whether or not, like, just for being like, no, this isn't helpful. Like,
well, and normally that's for a split second, and then they jump into persecutor because they then start being all arsey with me because I've said this isn't helpful because, well, I was trying to be helpful. It's not my fault if you're not. And then they start shouting at me, and I'm like, whoa, you were supposed to be helping. What part of this is helpful for me right now? And that's where
I can't do anything right.
Exactly. So the other thing, the next one is initiating poor behaviors. So initiating the other, it's about initiating other poor victimhood behavior in an attempt to feel good about ourselves or to get them to like us and therefore try to get them to meet our needs. So this is about, like, where we are going to be initiating them doing things that are not supportive to them to feel good about. So it's like, the thing that comes to mind is, like, we're out for the night and someone's struggling. It's like, okay, shots. Who's in for shots, right? Like, yeah. It's like, because I get to feel good about myself because I'm the one who's getting us to do shots, and you're going to feel better after shots. Are you really ever going to feel that much better after shots? No, not really. Very rarely. So
even baby shots.
Yes, even baby shots. That's the thing. That's the excuse that was given within our friend group of, like, it's just a baby shot. It's a shot. It's the same size as any other fucking shot. It's just it's just because we call it a baby shot, it makes it feel smaller, and so it feels like we're not really going down a path that's not going to be helpful, right?
Well, and it's like, I kind of said, I mean, I said it just because that is what we would call them, and it was a way to make us feel less bad about the poor behaviors that we knew we were playing into. It was like, it's just a baby shot. Like, just, no.
Yes.
No.
And another one is enabling poor behavior. So enabling other poor victimhood behavior as an attempt to feel good about ourselves, i.e. a red way trying to meet our needs, or to get them to like us and therefore try to get them to meet our needs. And similar kind of example here, I know somebody, this used to make me frustrated beyond all belief, who had an issue with a food addiction, and no judgment about that. We've all had different addictions throughout our life, and they had somebody in their life, and this person was, like, consciously, intentionally trying to eat in ways that were more supportive, more nutritious, more balanced, and they had someone in their life who would constantly come along and be like, come on, should we go for pizza? Should we do this? Like, and it was like, or if they were already like in that heading in that direction, they would enable the poor behavior by encouraging it further. It's like, oh, well, you've already had one slice. Why don't we just have the whole thing, kind of thing? Like, it's like, even if they haven't initiated it, they have enabled it. And again, they're doing it because they want to feel good about themselves, not because it's what's actually good or supportive for the other person. And again, this is not about saying you should or shouldn't eat pizza, or you should or shouldn't do things certain ways. This is about saying, if somebody has said, this is something I'm trying to do because I believe it's good for me, or this is something I'm trying to not do because I believe it's not good for me, having other people around who are going to either initiate or enable those behaviors because of their needs rather than because it's what's supportive for the individual in that situation. Another good example, which fits under the same umbrella, is justifying poor behaviors. It's like, oh, well, it's okay to do this because of da 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 da. So it's, again, justifying those poor behaviors that the person in the victim approach is engaging in as an attempt to feel good about ourselves. Red ways of trying to get our own needs met, or to try and get them to like us, and therefore by them liking us, that will meet our needs a little bit, or mask our unmet needs, or it'll help to get them to meet our needs. Yada yada yada, all the usual. Adopting. So this is about befriending someone or taking them under our wing because we feel sorry for them, as a way of us feeling good about ourselves, which is, again, a red way of trying to get our own needs met. And, like, it's interesting because this is like when we're talking about this, we often think about it in like friendship terms, where it's like, oh no, you can come and like be my friend. I'll take you. Like I feel bad for you. I feel sorry for you. I feel pity for you. So you come and I'll take you under my wing, so I get to feel good about myself. But there are people who literally adopt children as a way of trying to feel good about themselves, not because it's the right thing for them or for the child in question. Next option, toxic delaying. So this is about delaying our own needs fulfillment as a way, or as we try to meet the needs of the person in the victim approach. Again, to try to feel good about ourselves. It's like, oh, this person's got all this work to do. I'm going to help them do all this work. It's been 16 hours. I haven't eaten anything. I haven't drunk anything. I haven't been to the bathroom. I haven't taken a nap. That's what we're talking about, where we actually are denying ourselves the things that we fundamentally need as a way of trying to support somebody else. And a lot of the time, that's not even necessary. It's not even what they want. But that's why we're doing it. Team taking. This is about siding with somebody to try and make the person in the victim approach feel better about themselves as a way of feeling good about ourselves. So it's like when you have breakups that happen, if you have a breakup, someone goes through a breakup and there's one person who has been your friend for all this time, they were your closest friend through the whole thing, and you're the person they're closest to on the other side of it. That's kind of naturally how things tend to happen. But when we're talking about like when somebody is there's a group of friends who are all kind of equally friends with everybody else, and when the breakup happens, it's like, oh, I'm taking this person's side, as a way of trying to make the person who's like in that team feel good about themselves and make me feel good about myself because I've taken their side, so I've made them feel good about themselves. So toxic. And these things are so manipulative, and because they're manipulative, they're also persecutor approach behaviors, and still we get to feel good about ourselves because we think we're rescuing and doing something good, right? Wrong. Anyway, next one, minimizing / downplaying. This is about trying to make the situation feel smaller to make the victim feel better, or the person in the victim approach feel better, or to mask their discomfort. But what we end up doing there is we end up invalidating their experience. And by invalidating their experience, we are actually becoming the persecutor approach. So it's like we're trying to make them feel better about the situation being small. But if we try and make the situation seem small, but they're still having all these big feelings about it, they're like, well, but I feel this big way about it. If it's small, maybe there's something wrong with me that I'm feeling these big feelings about it because it's not really that big of a deal. And in doing so, their needs get compromised in the process. The next couple are they're kind of similar in a way, but there's a distinction between them. So the first one is persecutor bashing. So this is about bad mouthing the person who is in the persecutor approach simply to try and make the person in the victim approach feel better about themselves. And we're doing that to feel better about ourselves. It's a red way of trying to meet our own needs. And in doing so, we become the persecutor approach to the person who's currently in the persecutor approach. So they're going to become the victim approach in the triangles. This is where things like one move all of a sudden shuffles everybody else. And this is only when everybody is operating in the victim, in the drama triangle. Like this doesn't happen. Like you don't shunt everything around. Like one person's decision to shift from this to this, if they're in the drama triangle and you're in the empowerment ecosystem, one does not affect the other. But if everybody is in the drama triangle, one small shift and all of a sudden everybody's shuffled around.
One thing to be really mindful of with persecutor bashing and our next one is if it's not your situation, you should probably stay out of it because you don't know what the situation is going to come to. And we'll give a very general example, being witness to many friendships in my life, and people have gone through breakups within those friendships. There have times that I have jumped into that rescuer mode and just went to town like whack-a-mole, like bashing the person to a friend. And then they get back with the approach. And it could go either way. Yeah, I've been on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've been in every spot of the triangle doing this one. And then have them come back, and in the end, they end up being with this person. They look at you differently. Your relationship with that relationship is different. The other person has feelings towards you. Like, it's just never, like, this was one of the ones for me that I was like, this has gotten me in a lot of trouble. And since I have taken these into consideration. I'm like, that whole not my circus, not my monkeys thing. It's like, I'm going to support you, but I don't jump into these things anymore. And it has been so much healthier for the relationships that I'm in, because I am not jumping to the defense of whoever my friend is in the situation. And I know that it might come off a little harsh.
Well, and I think that there's nuance. There's nuance here. There is a difference between persecutor bashing or persecutor attacking, which is the next one we're going to come to, and naming poor behaviors as a way of supporting the person who is on the receiving end of those poor behaviors. Like, there's a difference between, like, a lot of the time when we're persecutor bashing, there's a dehumanizing element, like, oh, there's such an asshole, there's such a whatever, and there's no constructive purpose to it other than to try to make the person who's a victim in approach feel better, make us feel better, bring us closer together. So sometimes it can be, oh, I'm going to bring us closer by bashing this person so that I'll be closer to them, and they're being closer to them will meet my needs. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why we do this. And there's a difference between that and saying, but I care about you, and this thing that this person is doing isn't okay. And I think it should be like, you should be able to say to this person, hey, you're doing this thing and it's not okay with me, as a way of bringing the relationship closer together. There's a huge difference here. Or even saying, and actually, this thing this person did was not okay, and you have every right to feel how you feel about that. Like, naming the behavior as not being okay as a part of, like, validating somebody's experience and validating their feelings around that experience, hugely different to bashing the persecutor. That's the two distinct things. And this is why it's like, oh, I can see people going, oh, but are they not the same? No, because one, you're bashing the person, and you're bashing the person as a way of trying to get your own needs met, as opposed to naming the behavior and discussing the behavior as a way of supporting the person who you are in a conversation with. So the next option is, it's very similar, as I said, persecutor attacking. And this is like attacking the persecutor directly as a form of protection or defense of the person in the victim approach. So this is about, like, going up to this person and going, you have my friend, and blah, 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 like, and that could be like you could be texting them, you could be calling them and saying over the phone, you could be doing it in person, in getting in their face, or like having the situation face to face. And this is, again, like, we're doing this to feel good about ourselves. It's a red way of trying to meet our own needs. And in doing so, again, we become the persecutor approach to the person who was in the persecutor approach with respect to the other person, but now they become the victim approach in respect to us and our persecutor approach. So it's like, and they may still be the persecutor approach with respect to the other person. There might be like, they are in their own triangle, which is persecutor approach and victim approach. But by us coming in and doing the persecutor attacking, we then become the persecutor approach to their victim approach. And there's no constructive way. Like, there's a reason we call one of these a disempowering dynamic and the other an empowering dynamic. Nobody in that situation is empowered if you are in the drama triangle. And we'll get into this more in the next episode, but it's so important to recognize this, that these are things that are not supportive to us, as well as not supportive to the other people. So the next one is substituting. So if the person in the victim approach is staying connected to the person in the persecutor approach because they meet their needs, we can, as the rescuer, try to substitute meet their needs. We can try and come in and, like, have them transfer the dependency on the other person to us as a way of rescuing them. But when we do that, they become dependent on us to get their needs met, which means that we actually become the persecutor approach because they are disempowered and we are the ones who have the control in the situation, because we are the ones that have there's a dependency on us. Next one is, it's similar to one of the previous ones where it's like bashing others. This is not about bashing necessarily the persecutor. This could be bashing anybody. This is just about bad mouthing others simply to try to make the person in the victim approach feel better about themselves, as a way of feeling better about ourselves. But whichever way we're doing it, we're still becoming the persecutor approach to the people on the receiving end, who are then going to move into the victim approach, or likely to move into the victim approach. And we create a dependency that moves us into the position of persecutor approach too. Because again, if we're doing this to make somebody else feel good about ourselves, but the only way they feel good about themselves is if we are doing the thing, then they are dependent on us, which makes us the persecutor approach to their victim approach. it's exhausting. This entire triangle and everything in it is exhausting. It's exhausting thinking about it. It's exhausting talking about it. I cannot tell you how exhausting it is when you realize how much you are doing this. So the next option is do-over rescuing. This is trying to rescue someone else from a situation that we wish someone had rescued us from when we were in it, as a way of trying to feel good about ourselves. It's like, oh, I wish someone had come and rescued me from this situation. So if I rescue them, that will be a good thing, right? Wrong. There are other ways to approach this where you can support the other person without creating more of a dependency. Joking. Now, joking is not always a rescuer approach, but sometimes it can be. So, because when we're joking, bantering, or acting in a way to try to lighten the situation, to try and make the person in the victim approach feel better, and in turn try to feel good about ourselves, i.e. ways of trying to get our own needs met. But actually what it does is it shows disregard for the experience and the person in the victim approach. And so it moves us to the persecutor approach. So we're joking about something to kind of make it light, or it's another way of downplaying and minimizing. It's a version of that, basically. But we're using humor, or quote unquote humor, as a way of trying to do that. So it's like when we use humor, we're in some ways invalidating somebody else's experience, because we're basically saying it's not that serious. It's not that important. Oh, the next two. Banes of my life for many, many years. So we talked about bypassing earlier, and we talked about some of these instances of things that are bypassing. There are two big forms of bypassing that fall into the rescuer approach and are very toxic and are absolutely the persecutor approach disguised as a rescuer approach. The first is spiritual bypassing. So this is using spirituality or religion to try to bypass the situation, to make the person in the victim approach feel better, and in turn to make us feel good about ourselves, i.e. red ways of trying to meet our needs, or as a way of trying to mask our discomfort with the other person's pain and discomfort. So it's a way of masking our own unmet needs. And what ends up happening is, because when we bypass somebody's experience, what we do is we actually, we act to try to bypass someone's experience. We're actually acting to try to block or distort their healing process. Like bypassing something is going to prevent somebody from healing it. The only way we heal it is by naming it, facing it, and feeling it, and processing it effectively. And so when we use spirituality or religion as a way of trying to bypass this, it's like, and there's so many ways to do it. We're going to do some episodes on spiritual bypassing and the next one, and the next option, personal development bypassing, in the future, because there's so many examples of this. It's a way that people basically avoid the discomfort of the healing process, because that can be uncomfortable. It often is uncomfortable at times. And in doing so, they prevent the person who is in the victim approach actually doing their healing process. And in doing so, they become the persecutor approach, because they are compromising the other person's needs, because they're preventing them from healing. The next option, which is very, very similar, is personal development bypassing. So this is the same principle, but instead we're using personal development tools or techniques to try and bypass the situation and make the person in the victim approach feel better, and in turn to feel good about ourselves, as a way of trying to either a way of trying to meet our own needs, or a red way of trying to meet our own needs, or to try and mask our own discomfort with the other person's pain and discomfort, which is masking. So there's so many examples of this, but spiritual bypassing, a lot of people have heard of. Most people haven't heard of personal development bypassing. And so there's so many examples of this.
It's a rabbit hole.
It is a rabbit hole and a half. But for example, like if somebody is feeling grief, sometimes some personal development tools might encourage them to change their state, i.e. they do things with respect to the things that they're thinking about, what is actually happening physically with their body, and the things that they are doing and saying to try to stop themselves from feeling what they're currently feeling, and instead feel good, feel empowered, feel whatever it is in that moment. But if somebody is feeling grief, actually the only way to process that grief and heal from it is to feel it. So by pushing yourself into a state where you can no longer feel the grief, you are in effect bypassing the grief, which means it's going to sit there unresolved and unprocessed, and it's going to affect the person until that healing is done. And anything you are doing, if you're the ones going, oh, come on, change your state, come on, change your state, like you're basically going, I don't like you being in grief, I'm uncomfortable with that, I want you to change your state so that I don't feel uncomfortable anymore. But in doing so, I'm actually going to force you out of the thing that's going to have you really feel better, and instead have you mask feeling better by performing a state that is incongruent with actually what I'm feeling and what I'm dealing with at that point in time. I could say so many more things, and I'm going to keep going because otherwise this is going to be the longest episode on record. But we are going to come back to this in a future episode because there are so many examples of this. And the next is hole diving. So this is about diving into the hole of the person in the victim approach and taking it on as our own. It's like it's a way of trying, a red way of trying to meet our needs. So things like love and connection, acknowledgement, value, or to make them like us more, because if they like us more, like is a part of the love need, and so it's a way of trying to get our needs met or try to get them to meet our needs because they like us. So this is about someone going, oh, you got a hole down there, let me dive in there. Oh God, this hole's awful. Like it's another way of having their experience affect us so that we then end up affecting them. Lifeboating. This is about forming a relationship with the person in the victim approach to try and love and support them into feeling better about themselves. How many relationships have involved this at some point? If I can love them enough, they'll feel good enough. If I can love them enough, then they'll feel healed. If I love them enough, they'll realize they're worthy of love. And the truth of the matter is, you cannot love somebody enough to heal their unmet value need. All we're trying to do that is, it's a red way of trying to meet our needs by trying to feel good about ourselves by making somebody else feel better. And the truth of the matter is, we can't. That is a process they have to go through themselves. The next thing is heroing. So wanting to be and acting as the hero to someone else to feel good about ourselves. Another red way of trying to meet our own needs. Information overloading. This is a very common one as well. Overwhelming the person in the victim approach with information to try to feel good about themselves. Like, look, if I can give them all this information, look how much information, look how much of a good person, how good of a friend am I? I'm giving them all this information is going to make them feel better about themselves. But actually, they're drowning in the information, and it's not only not helping, it's adding to their sense of distress and overwhelm. Next is gifting. So giving the person in the victim approach things to make them feel better, to feel good about ourselves. Again, basically a red way of trying to meet our own needs, or to make them like us more, to either get them to try to meet our needs or just to have our needs met by having somebody else like us. Non-disclosure. This, I've seen this in so many families, which is like, quote unquote, protecting the person in the victim approach from situations or informations that might negatively impact them by not telling about them as a way of feeling like a good person. It's a red way of trying to meet our own needs. So it's like, if we don't tell them this, they won't feel bad about it. But what ends up happening then is that they are having relationships with people, or they're feeling certain ways about situations based on false information, which means the chances are at some point it's going to bite them in the ass. And our us trying to hide it is about us trying to feel good about ourselves. A lot of the time we convince ourselves, I'm doing it for their good. Like, I'm doing it to protect them from the blah, 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 blah. And the truth of the matter is, it's not about them, because again, if we want what's right for them, it's about making sure they have the information to make the choices that are right for them, and trusting that they have the ability to make those choices and supporting them in those choices, versus I'm going to take the power of them knowing away from them by not telling them about it. Becoming an emotional landfill is the next one. So this is acting as the dumping ground for the person in victim approaches mental and emotional issues to try to feel good about ourselves. Like, it's a red way of trying to meet our own needs, where it's like, oh yeah, tell me more. But it's doing in a way which is actually not supportive of anybody. Suspension of norms. This is something that I have had a lot of experience with in my past, which is about all of the usual rules going out of the window, for example, regarding time, finances, or resources, to do anything to make the person in the victim approach feel better and to try and feel good about ourselves. Like, it's a red way of trying to meet our needs. So what do we mean by that? So it's like, well, if there's a problem, if there's an emergency, then and we can do this for ourselves. It's important. We can take all of these positions we can be in for relative to ourselves, and we're going to get into that more in the next episode. But it's like, if you're saying to somebody, like, for example, if you're normally on a budget and something's gone wrong, the person's gone through a breakup, there's something that's happened that has negatively impacted them, and they're in victim approach, it's going, oh, to hell with the budget, we'll spend whatever money we want because this person's feeling, so that I can make this person feel better about ourselves. And then we often end up putting ourselves at deficit to try and help the other person, even though we were trying to help because we were trying to feel good about ourselves, but we did it in such a way which wasn't going to be good for anybody.
See how that works?
And the thing is, even if there isn't really a negative impact to them, there's still this kind of like, a lot of the time there is a negative impact. So let's say, for example, you were in a financial situation where you're it doesn't cost you. I mean, it costs you, but like you don't notice the like, to spend that extra money is like, actually it's fine. We don't need to worry. Like, I'm just spend whatever it takes to help make this person feel better. The challenge is that person then becomes dependent on you in challenging situations to spend whatever money is necessary to get them out of it. So it still is going to keep them in that dependency position, which keeps them in the victim approach rather than moving them out of the drama triangle altogether. Unintended false promises. This is about falsely promising change to rescue the person in the victim approach from our own persecutor approach behavior. Even if we're not consciously aware that the promise is false and will never be followed through, this is done as an attempt to feel better about ourselves. So it's like saying to somebody, so I've done this shitty thing and I'm going to promise to change so I can rescue the person in the victim approach from my shitty persecutor approach. But they're false promises because we're not actually going to do anything in order to change it. So what ends up happening is that they are going to get impacted by the same thing again in the future. And we're going to be the persecutor approach them all over again. In fact, it's going to be worse because we've promised that we will change. So they're trusting that there will be this situation won't happen again. So when it does happen again, it's going to hit them even harder because you've already had the conversation and promised that it won't happen. And so you're doing it as a way of trying to a red way of trying to meet your own needs. So it's like, I get to feel good about myself in this moment because I'm making the situation better, or as a way of masking the impact to you of the compromising somebody else's needs. Because there's not really going to be any change. Like, if this is like, I'm actually doing something to heal the situation to ensure it won't happen again in the future, then that's a very different situation. But instead, all we're doing here is it's all a mask. It's this false, like, oh yes, of course I'm going to change. No, this will never happen again. Because we're not actually going to change. We're going to remain in that persecutor approach. We just temporarily convince ourselves that we're in the rescuer approach to feel better about ourselves, i.e. it's a red way of trying to meet our needs. The next is well-intentioned gaslighting. Again, happens so frequently. So it's about trying to change how the person in the victim approach feels by telling them they don't feel that way. So for example, like someone saying, I'm scared, and if someone says to you, oh, I'm scared, and you say to them, oh, you're fine, you're not really scared. And it's like, really? Like, children are often subjected to this form of rescuing because it's like, Mummy, I'm scared. Oh no, you're not really scared. And the reason that they're saying you're not really scared is because they're not really scared because they can see the bigger picture of what's going on. Children they can't always see that. And sometimes the fear is not necessarily about what the parent thinks it's about. It could be about something completely unrelated, or maybe something that's connected, but a weird tangent, because kids' brains, as with a lot of us, can take weird tangents at various reasons. So, or it may be to make them feel like less of a victim by trying to convince them that the situation is not how they believed it to be or not severe. So, for example, if a person believes that their partner is cheating, and you go, oh God, I'm sure that my partner's cheating on me, and then go and saying that to your friend saying, oh no, that they're not cheating. They would never do that to you. And they're doing it so that they can placate your fear, but they're doing that because they're uncomfortable with your fear. They're doing it to feel better about themselves. It's not really about the other person, even though a lot of people will have them convinced it's about the other person in this situation. But actually what it does is it invalidates their experience. So it actually puts us in the persecutor approach. So I can imagine someone being like, like, I'm sure that so-and-so is cheating on me. I found this and I found this. And if someone else comes up to them and go, oh, no, they would never do that to you. Like I'm sure that's not happening. They would never do that to you. On the surface, that looks like they're being supportive. But in actual fact, what they're doing is they're invalidating how this person is feeling and well-intentionedly gaslighting them and saying, no, that's what you know to be happening is not what's actually happening, which actually puts them more at risk. And actually
Mm-hmm.
that validation of how they're feeling means that the invalidation itself is the persecutor approach behavior, because you're invalidating the other person's feelings, which means that you're invalidating and compromising their needs. There's also another one that's that can fall into a number of different categories, and we were talking about this in the last episode, where we were talking about like romanticizing and how romanticizing can take a number of different views on it. So it could be a form of toxic positivity, where it's like I'm doing this and I'm being falsely positive about a situation that really isn't that positive, as a way of trying to romanticize what's going on with it. Or it could be a form of well-intentioned gaslighting, where it's like the person's like saying, oh, this is happening, and then and the other person's going, oh no, that's not what's really going on, I'm sure it's this and this. And again, because they're romanticizing the situation, they're well-intentionedly gaslighting, but in doing so they're compromising the person's connection to reality as they know it, and undermining how they feel and what they know. And then the final one, I say final one, this is not exhaustive. Like, this isn't a list of all of them. It's just some of them. But the final one we're going to talk about today is attempted absolution. This is where, when we are in the persecutor approach, we try to rescue the person in the victim approach from our behavior as an attempt to be the good guy or the good girl or the good person, to no longer be in persecutor approach in an attempt to feel better about ourselves, and to mask the feeling of compromising the other person's needs. So it's like when we're in persecutor approach, we then flip the script and be like, oh no, okay, let me make it better for you, when you're the one who's done the thing that's had them not feeling good in the first place. But you're doing it to rescue them from your poor behavior, as opposed to actually taking responsibility for what you did on the first place and healing that process by apologizing effectively and making constructive change to ensure that you don't do the same thing in the future. That's a massive, like, both of them could, like, on the surface it might look like the same thing, where it's like, oh look, I'm doing this thing to make them feel better about what happened. One is, I'm taking responsibility for my actions, and I'm going to act to ensure that I heal the impact of that, and I make sure that things are better in the future. If you haven't already listened to it, go and listen to the Apology Blueprint episode. The other is, oh, I feel crappy because I've done this thing to negatively impact them. Look, I'm going to do this other thing to try and make them feel good, because that's going to make them feel better about the fact that I negatively impacted them, even though I'm not going to address the thing that I did that negatively impacted them, or heal the process, or do anything to ensure that it doesn't happen again in the future. Two very, very different situations. So, long list. And the thing that's really important to recognize here is that we have been conditioned in our culture to see rescuing as a good thing. Like, look at all the superhero movies that we have out there. Look at how heroes in movies or in TV shows are viewed. They are viewed as this pinnacle of goodness. They are, and there's a difference between, like, don't get me wrong, if somebody's like hanging off a building and they've I don't know, they were in a situation and they slipped and they're hanging by a rope, hanging off a building, I'm not saying that you go, oh, I'm sorry, can't rescue you, that's harmful apparently, bye, and off you go. Like, there's actually, this is the reason we talk about this difference between the approach to the situation and objectively what is happening. Yes, sometimes objectively rescuing somebody from a harmful situation like that is a very helpful and supportive thing to do. But a lot of the time we don't realize we might be trying to rescue somebody actually in this objective way, but how we're doing it is we're taking a rescue approach, which is disempowering to us, them, and everybody else in the situation. So I'm not saying don't rescue somebody if you see them, as said, like hanging by a thread and you're the person who's there to pull them back over the ledge because something's happened. Like, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about taking a rescuer approach to how things are happening. And when we take this rescue approach, we drop into the drama triangle along with everybody else. And there is no way out of the triangle from within the triangle. You cannot triangle your way out of the drama triangle. You can't rescue approach enough to pull you and other people, to pull anyone out of the drama triangle. All that entering into those positions will do is continue to keep you all in there. So it's really important to recognize that although we've been conditioned in our culture to see rescuing as a good thing, rescuing in this context, taking a rescue approach to these situations can be very, very harmful. And we're going to get into that more in the next episode. We're going to dive deeper into why. And we're going to look at some other things about the drama triangle that are really important for you to know and be aware of before we start to move into understanding the empowerment ecosystem. Anything you want to add before we finish up?
Oh, no, I've done very good dancing my way around rabbit holes. So I'm going to continue that.
There have been many a rabbit hole. But we are going to come back to these things because, as I said, this has all been kind of content rich, but that's because we really want you to understand what these things are. And then when you understand what they are, then we can talk about them in a way where you're going to understand them better. And once we understand them better, we start talking about these dynamics and how they show up in our day-to-day lives. It's remarkable how much you're going to see them. So just between now and next time, just pay attention to them. Just notice the victim approach, the persecutor approach, and rescue approach when you see them. And if you're like, okay, so this was happening, and I think this is the victim approach, but is it really? Or I think this might be the rescuer approach. Like, if you want clarity on that, send it our way. And if possible, we might actually record another episode to be like, this is one of those situations where it's like the Reddit thing, like, am I the asshole if? And it's like, well, sometimes yes and sometimes no. There's context that's important. Like, am I a rescuer approach or not? We could start a whole new Reddit thing. Like, am I a rescuer? Am I a persecutor? Am I a victim approach? Maybe not. But you see what I mean? Like, if you have some questions about this and you want further clarity, please do reach out. We'll be happy to help. We will be back next week where we'll talk about why the rescue approach is so harmful. Between now and then, remember to stay safe, to take care of yourself, and continue to meet your own needs. Thank you for listening. Lots of love. Bye-bye.
Bye, friends.
That's it for today.
If you like what you heard
and would like to see some of Serena's awesome facial expressions,
check out the video podcast on YouTube.
And remember, even though it's often seen in our society as a good thing, the rescue approach has chronically unmet needs. They are a victim approach at core. The core feeling is anxiety or anxiety related, and the focus tends to be on the problems. Remember, there is a better way, and we're getting to it really soon.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.